What if I told you that McLaren's real problem is not the car, but what is starting to happen within the team after China? Because Zak Brown has sent a message that changes absolutely everything. No more excuses, no more living in the past, and now Norris and Piastri are under pressure that could break the internal balance just before Suzuka. And the most worrying thing is not what he has said publicly, but what it really means for McLaren's immediate future. What happened in China was not a simple setback. It was the type of blow that leaves a scar within a team that came from the top. McLaren arrived with the inertia of having been a reference, with the feeling that the project was still under control, but in a matter of hours everything fell apart. The double non-start not only eliminated any sporting option, it also exposed a fragility that until then had been attempted to be hidden. Different problems in different cars, but with the same result. 0 laps, 0 answers, and many doubts. That scenario completely changes the narrative around Norris and Piastri. Until now, both were protected by the context of a competitive car and a winning structure, but when the machine fails, all the focus shifts directly to the drivers. And that's where Zak Brown's message comes in, because it doesn't appear at any given moment, it appears just when the team loses its safety net. There are no longer technical excuses that can sustain the discourse. Now what matters is how its two key pieces react under real pressure. The problem is that this pressure does not come on equal terms. Norris comes from being the benchmark, the driver around which much of the narrative of recent success was built. Piastri, on the other hand, reaches this point with accumulated frustration, without having been able to really demonstrate his potential in this start marked by failures. And that creates a dangerous imbalance, because while one tries to consolidate its position, the other needs to recover ground in a context that is not allowing it. That's where internal risks begin. Zak Brown knows this, and that is why his message has a very clear double intention. Outwardly, it protects its pilots, maintains the discourse of unity, and avoids fueling media noise. But on the inside, what he is doing is raising the bar immediately. He is saying, without explicitly saying it, that this is the moment where talent is separated from real leadership. Where it is not enough to be fast, but you have to support the team when everything around begins to falter. And just when all this is happening, Japan appears on the horizon. A circuit that does not forgive mistakes, that exposes every weakness, and that demands absolute precision. McLaren does not arrive there with certainties, it arrives with questions. And that makes Norris and Piastri more than just drivers. It makes them the emotional and competitive thermometer of a team that needs urgent answers. Because in the end, Brown's message isn't just about performance. It's about control. To prevent a technical crisis from becoming an internal crisis. And when a team manager has to intervene in such a direct way so early in the season, it is because the situation is much more delicate than it appears from the outside. And this is where everything starts to get really interesting. Because Zak Brown's message not only looks towards the immediate present, but points directly to the future of the team in this new cycle. What happened in China is not an isolated case. It is a warning sign that suggests that the MCL 2026 is not where it should be, and that completely changes the rules of the game within McLaren. It is no longer about managing an advantage. Now it is about surviving a stage of technical uncertainty where each decision counts twice as much. The problem is that when the car is no longer a guarantee, the internal dynamics become much more fragile. And that is where Brown's message takes on even more weight, because it not only demands performance, it demands total commitment to the project at a time when it is easy for doubts to appear. Doubts about development, about technical direction, and the most dangerous thing, doubts among the pilots themselves. Because when the results do not arrive, internal comparisons become inevitable. In this context, Norris and Piastri no longer compete only against the rest of the grid, they also begin to compete to position themselves within the team for the future. And this is key because McLaren is entering a phase where it needs to clearly define who leads the project if things get complicated. We saw it in the recent past with strategic decisions that generated noise around possible favoritism, and now that ghost appears again at just the worst possible moment. Zak Brown tries to get ahead of that scenario with a message that seeks to avoid an internal fracture before it happens. But at the same time, that same message can have the opposite effect if the results do not follow in Japan. Because in Suzuka, not only the performance of the car will be evaluated, the driver's reaction to pressure will also be measured. How they manage errors, how they work with the team, how they respond on the track when they no longer have margin. And here appears a key element that often goes unnoticed: trust. Not only the driver's confidence in the car, but the team's confidence in its drivers. China has hit that relationship in both ways. The drivers have felt that the car has failed them, and the team now needs to see how they respond when things get complicated. It is a silent exchange, but decisive. Because if this moment makes anything clear, it is that McLaren is no longer in construction mode, it is in validation mode. Validation of the car, the project, and above all, its two drivers as real pillars of the future. And when a team reaches this point this early in the season, it means the margin for error has been reduced to a minimum. That's why Japan is not just another race. It is the first real test after the coup. The scenario where Zak Brown's message stops being words and becomes facts. And that is where we are going to begin to see if McLaren has the necessary strength to overcome this crisis, or if, on the contrary, this is just the beginning of something much bigger. And now is where everything is defined. Because after Zak Brown's message, after China's coup, and after all the accumulated tension, the moment comes when there is no longer a narrative to sustain the situation, only results. Japan is not going to wait for McLaren, it is not going to adapt to its problems, and much less is it going to soften the impact of a possible new debacle. Suzuka is the type of circuit that exposes the unfiltered truth, and that makes this weekend a point of no return for the team. This is where Brown's message takes on its starkest form. Because it is no longer about motivating or protecting or even putting pressure, it is about evaluating. Evaluate whether Norris can definitively assume the role of leader in an adverse context, and evaluate whether Piastri is capable of responding when everything works against him. There are no longer valid technical excuses, because although the car continues to have doubts, what is at stake now is the human reaction within the team. The most delicate thing of all is that this type of scenario not only defines a weekend, it defines hierarchies. And in Formula One, internal hierarchies are inevitable when a team goes into crisis. McLaren has tried to maintain a balance between its two drivers, but situations like this force implicit decisions to be made. Who receives more support, who has strategic priority, who becomes the reference when the course must be rebuilt. And those decisions are not always announced, but they are felt on the track. If Norris responds solidly, if he manages to prevail in a complicated context, he will strengthen his position almost definitively. But if Piastri manages to reverse the situation, if he manages to stand out just when the pressure is greatest, then the internal balance changes completely. And that is the scenario that worries the most within the team, because it involves opening an internal battle at the worst possible moment. Zak Brown has tried to get ahead of all this with his message, trying to maintain cohesion before the cracks appear. But the reality is that this type of control only works until the cars go out on the track. From there, everything depends on what happens turn by turn, decision by decision, error by error. And that's why Japan is not just another race on the calendar. It is the first real trial after the collapse. The moment where McLaren has to demonstrate if it is still a champion team capable of reacting, or if the impact of China has opened a much deeper crisis than it seemed. Because in the end, what is at stake is not just the result of Suzuka, it is the future internal balance of McLaren in this new era. In the end, it all comes down to a very simple but extremely powerful idea. McLaren has stopped running comfortably, and now it has to show what it's really made of. Zak Brown's message was not coincidental. It was not a hot reaction after China, it was a declaration of intentions at the most critical moment possible. An internal warning that the team is entering a new phase where talent and the recent past are no longer enough. Everything is now measured by how you respond when the system begins to fail. Norris and Piastri are at the center of that storm. Two drivers with indisputable talent, but now subjected to pressure that goes far beyond the stopwatch. Because what is at stake is not just who is faster. It is who can sustain the project when doubts appear, who can lead without guarantees, who can lead the way when the team needs it most. Japan will be only the first chapter of this new reality, but a decisive one. There we will see if Brown's message achieves its objective of uniting and strengthening, or if, on the contrary, it uncovers tensions that were already growing from within. Because in Formula One, crises are not announced, they are revealed. And many times they start just like that, with a technical failure, and a message that changes everything. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.